As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed. Indeed, only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." So I have a question for you. Is Mary's devotion better than Martha's service? Let's have a vote. So on this side, put up your hand if you think Martha's service is more important. Okay, no one. Yeah, it's a bit, okay. And now for Mary. Again, okay. How about this side? Those for Martha, hands up. Yeah? But I'm getting both as well. Okay. So I wondered if looking up on Wikipedia online would give us the correct answer. The gist of Wikipedia said Mary chose listening to the teachings of Jesus over helping her sister prepare food. Because Jesus responded that she was right, because only one thing is needed. One thing meaning listening to the teachings of Jesus. Do you agree with Wikipedia? That authority on the internet. So there are many practical problems with interpreting the story this way. For example, who's going to set up the church for the Sunday service? Or the personal ones. Can I really excuse my laziness by saying, well, I was listening to Jesus, you know? Rudyard Kipling's poem, The Sons of Martha, concludes in this way. It says, "And the sons of Mary smile and are blessed. They know the angels are on their side. They know in them is the grace confessed, and for them are the mercies multiplied. They sit at the feet, they hear the word. They see how truly the promise runs. They have cast their burden upon the Lord. And the Lord, he lays it on Martha's sons." How about this story then? There was a 4th century ascetic monk out in the desert, and he refused to perform any labour. How did the abbot deal with that? Well, he shut him in a cell with a book without food. And he said, "Because you are a spiritual man and do not need that kind of food, we, being carnal, want to eat, and that is why we work. But you have chosen the good portion and read the whole day long and do not want to eat carnal food." People sometimes say, don't they, "Oh, you know, I'm a Martha," meaning they're practical, they're busy, they don't have time to contemplate and pray. And the danger is that it's kind of easy to carry some guilt like that on the one hand, or on the other to turn it into an excuse for not praying and to say, well, actions, you know, are over faith. But actually, both are needed, aren't they? We need people to help set up the church and take down on Sunday mornings, and we need people to pray and to worship. So I'd like to suggest that if we try to make sense of this story of Jesus by comparing the active, practical Martha with sitting at the feet of Jesus, contemplative Mary, we don't really get anywhere. Asking, are you a Mary or a Martha, maybe in this way, is like putting up the ladder on the wrong wall. It gets you to the wrong roof. So what do we see here? Well, it's Martha that comes on the scene first, Luke tells us in his gospel. He credits her with opening her home to Jesus. And it seems that she is the one who is the hugely important action person in the Middle Eastern tradition of hospitality that has welcomed Jesus, opening her home. And Jesus says, and I guess it's much to Martha's confusion and annoyance, that Mary has chosen the better part. What does that mean? What is Mary doing? The gospel writer tells us two things. Mary sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. So what's really going on here? Well, when Luke tells us in the book of Acts that Paul sat at the feet of the Rabbi Gamaliel, he wasn't telling us that Paul, was actually sitting there at the feet of Gamaliel. He was telling us that Paul studied under Gamaliel. He was his disciple, his student. He sat at his feet. To sit at someone's feet meant very simply to be their student. So when Mary sat at the feet of Jesus, she was taking her place. And note, traditionally it would have been a man's place that she was taking. She's listening and learning to follow Jesus as his disciple. She's saying, I am one who is going to learn his teachings, follow his example, and I'm going to obey him by making other disciples myself. Jesus' disciples included both men and women, something new at the time. But we're still left with Jesus saying, Mary has chosen the better part, and it will not be taken away from her. Does the contrast between Mary and Martha mean that we should listen rather than do? No, because we've already heard in last week's passage, which was about a man, we've heard this is a woman, we've heard Jesus tell us the parable of the Good Samaritan, meaning we are to be like Jesus, the Good Samaritan. We're to care practically for those in need who cross our path. So it can't be that. It can't be that we should listen rather than do. The story tells us, it actually says that Martha was distracted. She was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. And Jesus tells her, you are worried and upset about many things. It's telling us that Mary has lost her focus. She's not guarded her heart, as it were. Proverbs 4:23 tells us, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. She's taken her eyes off of Jesus, and she's allowed these distractions and worries to occupy his place in her heart. And she's no longer making the arrangements with love and devotion for Jesus, the one thing needed. And I find this myself, actually, if I go too long without prayer, especially the silent, contemplative kind, I become preoccupied with the cares of the day, cares of life, and they actually loom much larger than they really are in reality. They take over. Without prayer, we're no longer able to do things through Jesus. Our focus is gone. We try to do things for him. Out of touch, no longer sitting under his grace, outpoured freely for us from the cross, we become like dry sponges. You know those dry natural sponges you can buy? They're very hard, aren't they? They're hard and they're lifeless. And as they are, to begin with, they're unable to soak up the water. Our hearts can become hard like the sponge, no longer able to soak up the water, if you like, of God's love and grace. And so, without receiving it, we're unable to give it to others. That dry sponge needs a little time in the water, time in prayer to soak it in. True service for Christ happens only when Mary and Martha come together in us. Action and contemplation are to be two sides of the same coin, not two separate coins. There's a rather nice Catholic reflection I came across on this. It goes like this. So how will I treat Jesus? This is American. So how will I treat Jesus when he sits at my table this Thanksgiving? Will I ignore him in favour of basting the turkey? I hope not. I hope to sit down and take in his beautiful face. I hope to spoon him the mashed potatoes that have been sitting in my crock pot since that morning. Because even if I'm not a natural Martha or Mary, I'm faking it all the way. Of course, Mary chose the better part when she chose Christ, but since I want food on the table when my guests arrive, I'll agree with Cardinal Anastasio Balestrero, the former Archbishop of Turin. In our house there is room for Martha and room for Mary, and we must occupy both places. We must be Mary because we are welcoming the Word, and we must be Martha because we are receiving the Son of Man. So the church does need to be set up on a Sunday, and the practical Good Samaritan help of neighbour needs to be done as they cross our path, along with prayer and worship. But they all need to focus on the one in whose name and through whom we do them. We need to be Marys in order to be Marthas. And we do that by daily prayer, by soaking that sponge. So may I issue a challenge to you this week to take a few minutes each day to pause, to be still, to be like the sponge, and in the words of Psalm 46, receive this promise. Be still and know that I am God.